right, next on our agenda is public comment. We have quite a few members signed up for public comment. When I read your name, if you could please come forward to the podium. Based on what we have, we typically give 15 minutes. I would count about 15 people on here, so we'll give everybody 3 minutes. I'll time that. When you're giving your public comment, there's no need to be repetitive. If somebody's already made the comments that you were wishing, you can simply come forward and say, I agree with so-and-so based on their comments. We'd appreciate that. First on the list is Dennis Helke.
Dennis Helke, 2065 Ronald Street, Corona, Wisconsin. This is going to be a little different than what some of my colleagues are going to mention, but this is from a personal experience. I'm 73.9 years old, and my experience riding bike began at the age of 13. I won the City Marbles Championship, and my prize for that was a 15-speed Schwinn Sierra varsity racing bike. So started at a young age. Just to ask you guys a question, members, how many of you ride bike? Raise your hand. No, I'm talking about the board. I'm sorry. Okay. And how far do you guys ride? You know, how do you ride in the city? Do you ride in the county? How many ride on the back roads, county highways? You know, I would imagine probably not a lot of it you hear. The wheelers ride mostly on county roads for the most part, which are fairly safe, but to get to some back roads that we ride, we have to cross some major roads, county roads. And those roads are the ones that are susceptible to the rumble strips, Highway J and Highway XX and KK. I do not like riding in the middle of the road, which the rumble strips would force us to do. And we might be legally right in order to do that, but I don't necessarily want to be dead right because we're taking up room that is also designed for cars, and they don't often give us the right of way like they're supposed to. What I'd like to do is invite you guys to come on a ride with several of us wheelers, riding on the Highway 153, a straight away. Their line of sight is a long ways, and ride and experience what it is to ride on a rumble strip. That is kind of unnerving, and you'd actually get a feel of how dangerous that is, especially when you're riding with the wheelers group or 3 or 4 people behind you like we do every Tuesday night and Thursday mornings. It's just not safe. During that demonstration that we did a video regarding that, and it just shook the living daylights out of the bike, out of the rider, myself, and also phone flipped because of the vibration was so bad, and it's not a fun experience, especially. And I'm a fairly experienced rider, but when you're riding with different age levels, group levels, it can be kind of a unnerving thing. So several years ago, the wheelers were recognized as a safe riding community. The community leaders feel that this was an awesome award to be proud of. People recognize that Wausau is a great biking community, along with an excellent mountain bike community, the CWAC people, Central Wisconsin Off-Road Cycling Coalition. That helps bring in younger people to the area, and they also live and work here, and we want to attract more people to come to the Wausau area and to use our facilities. We have a great biking community, and also for recreational uses.
Dennis, if you could wrap it up, please.
Adding rumble strips is not advisable. So come to a ride to experience what this is like. We'd enjoy having you, and you know, that's pretty much the end of my comments, Randy.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next on the list, we have Jonathan Smith. Reminder with the public comments, it's meant to be comments directed to the chair. It's not a question and answer with the committee. Thank you.
Hello, Chair and this committee. My name is Jonathan Smith. I'm a resident at 1114 Prospect Avenue, Wausau. I'm here to share both as a Wausau resident and cyclist and commuter first, and then I'll share a recommendation by Wausau's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, a committee that I chair. In fall 2022, I moved back to Wausau after living in the Twin Cities for a job in my hometown in the decade that I was gone, and this place made significant improvements in its bikeability than when I grew up here. The improvements included the MPO bike map, which Highway X and KK are part of, and local advocacy and bicycle organizations and opportunities, including the Wausau Wheelers. If rumble strips are implemented without consideration of cyclists, it'll be a step back for Marathon County recreation, tourism, and overall cyclist safety. The stakes are high for safety improvements, and I do not envy this committee's responsibility to discern this information. Cyclists and drivers alike have died on the county highways that we're discussing today, and many of the safety improvements in the SRF consultant's report, if implemented previously, could have saved lives or avoided serious injury. However, the report does not take into account any efforts to improve safety for cyclists, one of the most vulnerable road users on a county highway. Thankfully, many studies have been done at the state and national level to guide implementation or recommendation of safety strategies to keep our county roads safe for cyclists and for drivers. I hope you'll consider the recommendations outlined by Wausau's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. On May 29, 2024, the City of Wausau Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, as an area bicycling stakeholder group and with the concern and safety of Wausau bicyclists in mind, met, discussed, and unanimously approved the following recommendation. The Wausau Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee recommends that Marathon County follow AASHTO, FHWA, and WISDOT guidelines regarding the use of rumble strips on Highway KK, X, and J. The recommendation would be to install 8-inch edge line rumble strips with 12-foot gaps for every 48 feet of rumble strip, only on roads that allow at least 4 feet of paved shoulder. Additionally, we ask that the county create, update yearly, and make publicly available a map of all rumble strips on county highways and indicate the type and width, if paved, of the shoulder. Additionally, new or reconstructed roads should include shoulders wide enough to meet the guidelines above to accommodate bicyclists on the shoulder and edge-line rumble strips. We recommend that the county involve and include road users and stakeholders in discussion of future projects of rumble strips, including Wausau's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Rib Mountain's Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Subcommittee, and other community stakeholder groups. Furthermore, we would recommend minimal use of rumble strips on roads that are signed cycling routes. Thank you for your consideration.
Well timed, thank you. Next up, we have Joe Mella.
My name is Joe Mella. I live at I live in Rib Mountain. I am here specifically to speak on the topic of the proposed rumble strip installations on some of the county highways that are currently under consideration. The purpose of my presentation today is to touch on a specific aspect of this type of activity. It's tied to economic development. I have served as the president of the Wausau River City's Main Street, Wausau's Main Street organization for the past 20 years. I've served on Wausau Area Events Board of Directors for 25 years. I have served on the Iron Bowl and continue to serve on the Iron Bowl Board of Directors. I'm involved in an advisor for the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership. I've been working with a lot of different organizations whose focus is specifically on trying to work on economic development and enhancement of life and quality of life within Marathon County. One of the things that we always consider when we're thinking about these are the various aspects of the community that are our strengths. Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership employed an organization called TIP Strategies, which identified some of the strengths of our community. One of those strengths was a very strong focus on outdoor recreation. One of those types of outdoor recreation that has traditionally been the case here in Marathon County has been road cycling. We would hope that you would take into consideration the fact that any activity that's undertaken should take into consideration the impact that it might have on the perception that this is a community that has a strong support for road cycling and those types of activities. I mean, the word gets out, if our roads are not deemed to be as safe or as comfortable, people are not going to look at this community and think it's as an attractive community as it could be. So we view this as a competitive advantage we currently have, and I'd hate to lose that because of considerations that don't take into because of activities that don't take into consideration those types of impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tim White.
I am Tim White, 225721 Swan Avenue in Rib Mountain, Wisconsin. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, staff, commissioners. I am the executive director of Visit Wausau, also known as Wausau Central Wisconsin Convention and Visitors Bureau. We are the destination marketing organization for both visitors and also to highlight what it is like to live and work and invest in Marathon County. I just want to touch a few points why rumble strips are not the best solution and some recommendations towards that. So one of the interesting things in 2019, People for Bikes, which is a national organization, ranked the greater Wausau area number one as the best small city for cycling in the country. To speak to Mr. Mella's point, it is an attractor for tourism. People are buying property in the county so that they can ride the area roads and bikes and township and county roads. Also, you'll hear probably from some other biking aficionados and outdoor rec planners that will talk about our work to co-join a lot of the biking trails, and that would include the county roads as well. We have a very vibrant biking community, and so that rubs off on attracting other people. Our data sets show that in the rural areas of Marathon County, we have a ratio of visitors to residents. It's 2-to-1 using outdoor recreation amenities, and that includes biking. And so they are really being used by visitors. Tourists are coming in to use the outdoor rec amenities in the rural areas outside of the greater Wausau urban area as well. So that's really huge. We're positioning and marketing Marathon County as a hub for both road and gravel and mountain biking, and that attracts numerous cyclists due to our scenic rural amenities and well-maintained trails, and that would include the well-maintained county roads as well. As a DMO, as a destination marketing organization, we're positioning Marathon County as Wisconsin's base camp for all forms of outdoor rec. That includes planning and developing connected infrastructure for commuter, road, gravel, mountain, trail, and recreational biking. And so this plan is to promote all the work that's being done around the outdoor rec amenities, biking and paddling. Biking is huge because it's an infrastructure issue that is sustainable, and we've already got those resources here. And so I would ask to not do rumble strips. I would ask to invest in wider shoulders. That would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ben Hainish.
Ben Hainish, Rib Mountain, Wisconsin, and I just want to say that I concur with all the previous statements made.
Thank you, Ben. Next up, we have Bill Bertram.
William Bertram, 2207 Mount View Boulevard in Wausau. I represent the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership along with being an avid recreational biker. We believe that from the biker's viewpoint, side rumble strips create a dangerous obstacle for road bikers when a 4-foot shoulder is not included as part of the roadbed. This supports the view of the Wausau Wheelers, an active road bike club, one of the largest in the state, and the Wisconsin Biking Federation, an organization that advocates for safe roads for all types of bikes. The data and the construction guides from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, Wisconsin Bicycle Facility Design Book dated 2004 states in section 2.6.9 rumble strips, shoulder rumble strips are not suitable as a riding surface and present a potential hazard to bicyclists. The guide further states, shoulder rumble strips should not be used if they are being proposed for the purpose of improving safety for bicyclists. Their presence is more likely to cause a hazard for bicyclists than it is to enhance the physical separation between motorists and bicyclists. Furthermore, rumble strips should not be used unless there is at least a clear shoulder pathway available to bicyclists of 4 feet. We believe that the ever-increasing technology in cars with side sensors that read the fog line, that rumble strips will become a design of the past. This is supported by the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Highway Administration Rumble Strip Implementation Guide addressing bicycle issues on two-lane roads dated 2016. It mirrors exactly what the state of Wisconsin Design Handbook says. The Regional Transportation Planner for the North Central Region of WisDOT, in correspondence with me on May 24 states, regarding your question on shoulder rumble strips, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, WisDOT, currently follows the same recommendations for accommodating bicyclists identified within the rumble strip implementation guide addressing bicycle issues on two-lane roads that was attached to your email. GWPP believes with the additional biking infrastructure that GWPP and others are developing, road, rail to trails, gravel, and mountain, that the addition of side rumble strips sends a bad signal and is in conflict with the design guides at the state and federal levels for recreational biking in the community. And it will reduce our attractiveness for bike tourism and providing a safe connectivity from road to gravel to rail to trail. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tim Gaithman. Okay. Thank you. Next up, we have Todd Troy.
Good morning. I'm Todd Troy. I live on Swan Avenue in Rib Mountain. Didn't know Tim was a neighbor down the street. I'm a member of the Marathon County Highway Safety Committee, and I am also the president of the Wausau Wheelers. I've addressed this committee multiple times before in the past couple of years about this issue. Through my relationship with the Marathon County Highway Commission, I looked at data that was available to me through the Community Maps portal out of the DOT's DT 4000 data set. And I wanted to know how much rumble strips would really affect, shoulder rumble strips would really improve safety. So I looked at a 5-year period ending April of this year. So April 1st, 2019 through April 1st of this year. And I found 10 accidents. And the criteria were, this isn't all accidents, this is serious injury or fatality accidents. These were single vehicle lane departure accidents. So these are what you would be trying to cure with a shoulder rumble strip, not multi-vehicle. I didn't look at, again, I did not look at the data for no injury, but I was looking at serious injury or fatality. Out of these 10 accidents, 4 of them.
I thought we had this already.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, there's somebody on WebEx. If you could mute yourself, please. Go ahead.
Out of the 10 accidents, 4 of them occurred on Highway J. 2 of them were fatalities. Those 2 both involved alcohol and high-speed loss of control of the vehicle. 4 other accidents also included alcohol. 2 of them included deer hits. 2 more crossed the center line, so the rumble strip wouldn't have made any difference. They would have crossed the center line and they ended up in the opposite ditch. I have every single one of these accidents here printed and that I'll be happy to leave for the committee and enter in, and I also printed out a spreadsheet that I made up that basically includes the accident number, what kind of injury, and if a rumble strip would have helped. And there's not a single one that a shoulder rumble strip would have affected the outcome of these. I'm not saying that they couldn't, but what I am saying is that if you put these in, there's hundreds of riders in this club and others in the community that put on tens of thousands of miles. These are doctors, attorneys, teachers, engineers, architects, all walks of life in this community. And you're doing nothing to protect our safety while we're trying to ride. We are legal and intended users of these roadways. And the safety plan that you've come up with doesn't consider cyclists. You hired a consultant who only looked at motor vehicles. I want you to call that consultant and ask them if there are cyclists using these roads to this extent, are you still going to recommend this on roadways that don't meet federal or state guidelines to install these rumble strips on? You're trying to put these rumble
Todd,
strips
could you
on
wrap it
roads
up,
that are
please?
too narrow.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay. Who can I give this to?
And David, thank you. Next up, we have Scott Turner.
Good morning. My name's Scott Turner. I'm the Street and Park Superintendent with the Village of Remountain. I'm, representing the village, and I didn't want to rehash everything that's been discussed earlier today. However, we took a proactive advantage to looking at this back in 2001 when our Bike and Ped Committee discussed it. Our chair wrote a letter to the Infrastructure Committee at that time. The village board, or at the town board at the time, also drafted and signed a resolution opposing the rumble strips with the various reasons that were already discussed today. I'm here just again to support the recent email I sent out to the committee, to follow up with that, and to, comment on our, the village's perspective of the beginning infrastructure planning, also with the future development of recreation in the village.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jerry Klein.
Jerry Klein, Red Mountain, and just here to speak. You guys know I'm a staff person at City County IT, so I'm here speaking as a private citizen and as trustee of the Village of Red Mountain. I already sent information to the committee members earlier this week, and I don't want to reproduce a lot of what was said here, but I'm opposed to rumble strips. I've been very clear about that. I want to just identify a couple things and talk about things that this county could do differently. First, I want to say that our roads are awesome, Jim and the highway crew. We have a great highway system. Joe talked about it earlier. It's recognized. It's some of the best in the state. I biked all over the country. I biked in Florida one time, and I went to a bike shop to rent a bike. And the guy asked me where I was from. I told him, and he's like, "I grew up in Wisconsin. What are you coming here to bike for? You have the best biking in the United States." So we are fortunate to have that. The way that rumble strips are designed with the gaps, it specifically works very poorly for people that are biking in groups where you have people behind you. The gaps, when you see gravel, when you see sharp objects in the shoulder, and you're going at 20 miles an hour and you have two people behind you, you're not going to know, oh, I've got to see that gap up 13 feet, or 48 feet from now, there's a 12-foot gap. You can't do that. You're going to end up bunny hopping over the rumble strips. If you hit the rumble strips, you'll experience what Denny talked about. It's very dangerous for a bicycle to do. So second, the bipartisan infrastructure bill requires that lane assist and lane departure warnings be mandatory in all cars. So I really see this as something that's going to go away as a need. Both of my cars already have this and have had it for quite a while. It's been installed in cars for 20 years now, and it's going to be mandatory in all future cars. So I think I'll just go on to what I would think is the best recommendations. I think the best opportunity is that we add 2 to 3 foot shoulders on any road where we have the ability to do that without moving the ditch. A good example of this is I had to drive out to Stratford the other day. 107, or N from 107 to 97 has a really nice piece of gravel that could be paved, and you could get 2 foot shoulders out of it. Right now, there's about 8 inches, and the fog line is in there. Second, I would recommend that the county have an advisory committee for all of the other people that use roads besides vehicles. That would be bicyclists, pedestrians, ATV, UTV, and horses. And then that we update the safety plan to remove rumble strips and focus on wider shoulders. And last, I would suggest that the county have other ways to get public feedback on this than having meetings in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Chris Godorsky.
Good morning. Chris Godorsky, 2015 Liberty Ridge Way, Wausau here. Speaking on behalf of GWPP, I'm in the chair of the placemaking committee and going to echo some of the economic development conversation that we had. Just as a reminder, in today's world, it's different than what it used to be in that sense that young people are finding where they want to live first before they find their job. Back even in my younger days, you found your job and that's where you went. We're not on that map right now. We're growing about 1%, maybe 1.5%. Other communities are growing a lot faster because they are taking care of their amenities and focusing on outdoor rec and things like this. Our biking community is awesome. You heard from a lot of folks on that. We are doing a lot of efforts on creating mountain biking on Rib Mountain. We're also looking at gravel biking and those assets. So in the economic development world, we're just trying to shine a light on our best assets. And some of these things are our best assets, and we got to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is David Buckner.
Good morning. David Buckner, 4706 Tate Court in Wausau. I thank the board I thank the committee for this time for permitting me to speak. I'm a registered professional engineer in Wisconsin, participating in civil engineering. As many have said, Marathon County has a large cycling community, and it's growing larger every year. With the advent of e-bikes, this community is increasing exponentially by adding a segment of the population that couldn't previously cycle. With Rib Mountain's expansion plans soon to come to fruition, the cycling community will again be increasing. One might think that the consultant and the committee would be recognizing the increasing cyclist community and developing ways to make the cyclists safer. But alas, it is not. The very idea of installing rumble strips is a culmination of series of failure on the part of the consultant and a failure of the committee. The failure of the consultant and the committee is not realizing that there is not only vehicular traffic using the roadways, but there are cyclists using the roadways. Vehicles and cyclists both legally use the road and require safe travel. The greatest risk of injury or death for vehicles comes from head-on crashes, and those can be avoided with centerline rumble strips, or at least mitigated. The greatest risk of injury or death for cyclists comes from debris in the shoulder and deformed shoulders. The plan by the consultant and this committee purposely to deform the cyclist's lane of travel with rumble strips is both unsafe and unwise. The plan by the consultant and the committee to purposely deform the cyclist lane of travel puts cyclists at unnecessary risk. I urge this committee to reconsider deforming the shoulders with rumble strips and use the funding to make the roadways safer. and not unsafe. And I also urge the committee to use the funding for this to increase the shoulder width and perhaps have a better plan for keeping gravel and debris from the shoulders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Jim Clemens.
Good morning. My name is Jim Clemens. I live at County Road X in Kronewetter. I'm a cyclist, but I'm kind of going to put a new spin on this. I don't want to get hit by a car as a cyclist, of course, like the rest of these people. But as a resident, I'm very concerned about the noise with rumble strips. And I don't know if the committee's considered anything like that. I don't know if any of you have rumble strips in front of your home, but I think we should put some in front of your home for a while so that you get used to them, and let me know what you think. Like some of the people said, the rumble strips usually do not prevent any accidents. Usually you're going to just hear a little bit of a rumble strip noise, and you're still going to have that accident. With the technology that we have in our cars, the rumble strips are a waste of money and are just going to cause a wear and tear, degradation to our highways, and just cost us and our taxpayers more money. Thank you.
Thank you. And last on the list is Tim Gaithman.
Hi, Tim Gathman, Somerset Court in Cronenwetter, and I've asked Ben to join me. I just thought I'd give a visual demonstration because not everybody's a cyclist. And so when we are out pedaling on these roads, we tend to ride in a pace line. And so that just means that all the bikes are lined up one behind each other, and you're riding at 20 mile an hour, kind of front wheel to back wheel right behind each other, and it's very close and tight. We do that for a couple reasons. One, we want to stay to the right of the road. We want to stay tight and efficient. And also, it's a more visible group to motorists. And when motorists approach, it's a shorter group to pass around rather than have bikes all spaced out. But when you're riding a pace line, what happens is, much as you learn in NASCAR, that car in front is the one that's pulling the hardest. And each position further in the line has less and less work that they do. The person at the front eventually is going to get tired. And so as we ride in a pace line, the person at the front, you might pull for, I'm just going to say 1 to 2 miles. You've done your turn. You've carried the load for a while. You're going to rotate off, and you're going to go to the back of the line, and you get to rest a little bit because you get to ride in the draft of everybody else. But so I'm just going to show you with Ben and I what it looks like. So if Ben is, so bend down like you're on your bike there, Ben, and I'm right behind him. I'm about this close to Ben. This is physically how close we are. And when Ben is when he's done his turn, he's going to look, make sure there's no traffic to the left. He's going to signal to me, and I'm going to naturally go up, and he's going to be drifting back in line. And at this point in time, this is as close as you want to get. Now, if there's any issues with the road, anything going on, we just have to avoid those. Now, imagine you have rumble strips right beside you. That's why we're so concerned about it, is anytime you pull off or have issue, you're going to run into those rumble strips. And at 20 mile an hour right next to each other, nothing good comes from that. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment portion of the meeting. The rest of the meeting will be committee discussion with staff. Moving on, item 4, approval of May 9th, 2024 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. What is your pleasure?
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Dickinson. Was that a second from Gisselman? All right. Any further comments, questions on meeting minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? 4-0. Minutes are approved. Moving on to item 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. 5A is bug tussle. Item number 1, 2022 PSC grant funding loan. I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Robinson and staff.
Thank you. We're also joined by Scott Feld, who's Director of Public Affairs for Bug Tussle, who will be helping with the presentation. We're here today because we've been working with Bug Tussle for a number of years relative to expansion of broadband in the county, and I'm going to sort of talk about both projects together. In 2021, in November, the county joined with Fond du Lac, Calumet, Jackson, and Waushara counties in a $78 million total conduit bonding, where Fond du Lac County took the lead and went out to the bond market and secured funding. Of that $78 million, $25 million was earmarked for Marathon County. We're basically under conduit bonding. They go out and access the market. In this case, they obtained interest at 3.45%. The county basically guarantees the loan, but we're not a creditor, so it doesn't count where we're not borrowing the money. It doesn't count against our total bond authority. In exchange for our participation in that bonding issue, we received several things. One was we received 24 strands of the fiber, and the purpose of the bonding project was to construct 16 towers in the county and run fiber conduit and fiber to those towers and serve the people along the way. And on those towers, we received space that we can put our equipment. In the case of the former DNR tower, when it went down, we were able to work with Bug Tussle to put some of the law enforcement equipment on that tower, saving us the need to construct a new tower. In addition, we received 24 strands of fiber that they're running through there for county purposes. And Jerry can talk a little bit later about what that means, but it allows us to provide access to our facilities across the county. And then we receive 40 basis points on the amount of outstanding loan, and that's going to $50,000 payments twice a year to the county. 40 basis points is in essence 0.4% of on that balance. So in that borrowing issue, they borrowed the money, they proceeded. I think they ran into a number of issues, and I'll let Scott talk about what those issues were and the status of that project. And then I'll go quickly into the 2022 Public Service Commission grant. In March of 22, we supported applications on the part of Frontier, Serenity, and Bug Tussle for accessing the Public Service Commission grant process. Serenity was not selected, and we found out yesterday, and we'll talk about this later in the minutes, that Frontier withdrew their application or requested withdrawal of their application yesterday afternoon. And so we're now working with Bug Tussle. It was a $6 million project. They were looking for $3 million from the Public Service Commission and $3 million through other sources. They originally approached the county for $1.5 million in grant, and we thought that was excessive in terms of the county's share of that project. They're serving 636 approximately residents and businesses in that area. We had come up with a formula where we agreed to provide a forgivable loan of $235 a passing, or in this case about $142,000 plus for Frontier, but it would be a loan making the money available. And then we agreed to provide a loan of up to $3 million. The original thought was that we would use ARPA funds, and we found out later that ARPA is not an eligible funding source for this because of the duration of the loan going beyond the ARPA deadline. So we, when it came to the Infrastructure Committee in 2022 and the Finance Committee, the thought was use ARPA. By the time we got to the county board, it was determined that we couldn't use that. So the county committed to supporting the application and agreed to look for a funding source that the county board would need to approve at a later date. We are now at that date. Work has begun in that area, and Scott, if you could just give us a project and an update on where you are, and then I have some concluding comments. Scott there? He was there earlier and...
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Go ahead, Scott. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? No, I apologize. I had put myself on mute and started talking and didn't realize I was on mute. So thank you again for time to speak to the committee. Yes, Buck Tussle has been working hard on catching up, I guess is the best way to say it. We previously had been starting work back a few years ago, and we experienced some delays, a couple different reasons why. One had to do with we did not have a contractor that was doing good work. We terminated them and replaced them. We now have crews working diligently. Actually, we have 6 crews in the county right now as we speak. We have 30 workers working in various places in Mosinee, along Camp Road, in Hamburg, Little Chicago, different place, Athens, doing a variety of different stuff with handholds and drilling and the like. The second delay is that we did experience more rock when we started drilling. We experienced more rock than we first anticipated, which did cause some delays as well. But we are absolutely committed, and we are getting back on schedule that we should have the county portion of the project done by 2024, as well as John had expressed that we have started our work in the Levitt Camp area. And again, we have our crews in there as well, laying conduit, putting in handholds, and we absolutely expect that we will have both projects done by the end of 2024.
So the ask, we've been meeting and going back and forth. Their capital needs are $5 million for completing the 2021 conduit borrowing project and $3 million for the leather camp. However, their actual needs is up to $12 million because they need to have funding for capitalized interest and creation of a reserve fund and others. So the memo reflects their capital need. The initial resolution reflects the added costs that would be needed associated with the borrowing. Again, we are not at risk. There is a reserve fund that is set up, I think a 2-year reserve payment. So if they start missing payments, we would have more than adequate time to adjust. We are secured with the commitment of the assets. The fiber and the towers would become ours in the event of a default, which we are not anticipating. So the issue before the committee and the county board is whether or not we would support an initial resolution going to the county board, which is basically a designation that we intend to proceed. And it would be raising the borrowing limit that Fond du Lac County had in 2021 from $78 to $250 million and setting aside up to $12 million for Marathon County. The final resolution, which will have all the codicils and all of the other legal agreements, will come back for approval of the county board in September. That will require a 3/4 vote of the county board at that time. And all of the details would be there today. So we are requesting approval. And I would just point out that in light of recent information that we've obtained both from Frontier withdrawing from their PSC grant request and Charter wanting to give back certain census tracts in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, you realize how difficult it is to partner with people to get broadband service throughout the county. The advantage that we have with proceeding with Buck Tussle is they have been making progress. They've been building it out. They've got the towers in place, and the towers are important for Wi-Fi, but they're also important for cellular service. 52% plus of the data that people get comes through those towers, so they are important from a public safety perspective, and we have access to them. So we are requesting that you advance this to the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee, which will take it up next week. And if that is approved, it would go to the county board in June.
Thank you, Supervisor Robinson. Anybody on the committee have any thoughts, discussions, or I'd take a motion? Motion by Supervisor Dickinson, thank you.
Thank you. Was there any issue with the ARPA because of the delays, that the ARPA money had to be used in a certain amount of time? Now, I don't want to misinterpret the comment, but ARPA is supposed to be used a certain amount of time, but because of the delays then, we couldn't use that money? Is that correct?
I think there were a number of issues that we ran into. We proceeded because we thought broadband was one of the designated purposes of which you had ARPA funds. The problem became because of the borrowing and the duration. So there were a couple of issues associated with it. So when it came to this committee and when it went to the Finance Committee, ARPA was in play. And by the time we were working with Tony Phillips from the legal counsel from the Wisconsin counties and others to make sure that it was a viable tool, and we found out that it was not. And so when it went to the board, it was, instead of using an ARPA commitment, it was a commitment that we would evaluate other options. We did look at, Supervisor Dickinson, the potential for use of fund balance. The concern with the use of fund balance would be that it was a 30-year duration, and to tie up fund balance for 30 years seemed excessive. As of last week, the proposal from Bug Tussle was to evaluate or go forward with a conduit bonding proposal. And obviously with fund balance, we would have significantly more exposure.
Supervisor Soibert?
Thank you. John, do we know how many more towers are needed? I know we talked earlier on the coverage area has gotten, actually in our area, worse than what it was before. And how many more towers are going to be needed to give us the coverage that we even had before?
I can't even begin to try to answer that. I can try to put the question in context. With the evolution to 5G service, you tend to have a more powerful signal for a shorter distance. And as a result, there's a need for more towers. Each carrier, Cellular One, US Cellular, AT&T, and others, all have different arrangements, and some of them use there's multiple providers on towers, but it really depends on them. This initiative, the advantage of the initiative is that we'll have, at the end of the day, a significant number of additional towers. Bug Tussle partners with AT&T and others, but I don't know where each of the providers has access. I know that they are constructing additional towers on their own, but it's sort of a separate issue. It is an important issue for public safety and in being able to access cellular service and also data on that. Jerry, I don't know if you want to add anything.
John's correct. The main issue that happened where we're losing coverage is the transition into 5G. Bug Tussle, and Scott's on the call, so he can talk about this more than us. We are not party to their relationship with their cell carriers. I am aware that most of the 18 towers that they have now in the county that are live also have AT&T on them, but those towers that they own outright, they also have the ability to lease to other carriers. Cellcom in particular is one I know that they have some relationships with. So the answer to your question, I don't know. I don't have the answer to your question. I suspect, in a conversation I had with them a while ago, that they were talking about a few more towers, maybe 6. But that would be specific to the relationship with AT&T. Scott, if you want to address that, please do.
Yeah, Jerry, that's fine. Yes, we have roughly 18 up, and there's another 6 that are in progress as well. As for what Jerry and John had said, it's both correct, that with our towers, we also have AT&T. We're also working with other cell carriers to provide cellular service. I'm not sure if the question that the supervisor is asking specifically is cell coverage or if it is internet coverage, but as we try to do things, we try to have as many towers out there so we can provide wireless service as quickly as possible. But then as we start to work through this middle mile fiber that we're trying to finish up throughout the county, as well as then after the middle mile fiber, then we look to working with Marathon County in trying to access and take advantage of as much BEAD funding as possible to get that last mile funding to move out from the middle mile fiber that we're constructing and be able to get fiber to the home to those folks in Marathon County.
So if I take it right, the dollars that we're talking about now, that are on the table now, has nothing to do with the extra towers.
Correct.
For specifically addressing your question on there, they still have, Scott, you've got, I think, 16 towers done or completed in the county, and their number, I think, seven additional that are in different phases of either construction or permitting and construction, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, off the top of my head, it's 6 to 8.
Okay, thank you.
So that will help some of that when those towers do go online.
Supervisor Dickinson.
So in line with that, we talked about the miles, right? The miles of fiber, and I'm going to try to resist being a little bit upset about where this has gone, because there was a certain number that we were discussing, and I don't recall the exact number, and then that mileage number exploded as we went to towns association meetings, and everyone was getting their, hey, we can do that, hey, we can do that, hey, we can do that. So the number they originally promised in fiber miles was what? And then that became what? And where are we now?
Well,
would you like me to answer that, John, or
please.
would you guys like to answer that? So approximately when the first original design of the project was approximately just a little bit under 190 miles of middle mile fiber. And then after going from town to town to town, that increased significantly to well over 300 miles of fiber, of which, but the cost did not change, which was not correct, was not the right thing to do. So after having conversations with Marathon County staff and folks, we brought that back down to what the original is, which is, again, approximately 190 mile, as well as the towers. And then we're moving from that middle mile fiber to then go and do additional projects after we finish up the middle mile fiber project.
So if I can follow up to that, how much money was wasted and time wasted down this rabbit hole of going from 190 to over 300 miles? It's probably a rhetorical question. I'm throwing it out there because I don't think anyone knows. So this comes into this. My next comment, I guess, is we were at 25 million initially. Is that correct, or 24? And now we're looking at another 8, but up to 12. So it's up to 12. Okay, so that's a 50% increase. I would like, and then there are also deadlines about finishing at a certain time. I understand there's obstacles. I do know in those towns associations meetings, people were talking about, you have no idea what you're getting into when you get into the rock in the rural areas, especially in the western side of the county where I'm at. And that was, I guess, pleasantly just noted. It's a lot of money, and we eventually, our fund balance could be on the hook. Is it ever? I mean, that's what you had mentioned, John. So, I do have a lot of concerns, and we're talking the end of 2024 with the fiber being done, but the end of 2025 with the entire project. That's what's in the document in front of us. Now, it's just said 2024 at the end. Well, We were talking 2022, 2020, or 2023, 2024. My ultimate concern, as to finish this up, is what's coming next. When is another one of these papers going to come and say, you know what, we might just need another 6 million? That is a concern for me, or whatever that number might be. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson?
I want to go back and go through, I think, how we got to where we are. You know, we started looking at, I think we had some concerns as a county, and we as collectively, Jerry Klein and myself, and in talking with Chair Gibbs, we were concerned about the take rate. They were showing, we were getting periodic updates from Bug Tussle relative to how many people had actually signed up for their service, and the take rates were relatively low. We were also concerned that they weren't making some of the connections that were critical to the county. Again, we have the 24 fiber, and they're necessary for us to build out. And we began taking the discussions, and I think about that time, Bug Tussle internally brought in some new people that reevaluated their position. But we did grow from that 190. The 190 was the mile where that reflected the miles in the table at the time the county board adopted the resolution in 2021. So that hasn't changed. What happened is Steve Schneider, in his effort to try to appease and incorporate as many town halls and others, grew that. I thought it was approximately 370 miles, but don't hold me to that. But there was almost a doubling of that, and then they walked it back because of the cost. I would point out that Frontier, in their now withdrawn grant application, indicated that their cost had gone up $23 million for many of the same factors. And I think what you're seeing is, because of the infusion of the BEAD dollars, you're seeing inflationary pressures, you're seeing a shortage of workers, which drives up cost, and trying to attract them. Both Charter, Spectrum assumed that they could string fiber throughout the county. When they went into RDOF, they found out that they had to bury it because of the distance between the poles. So there were a number of factors that did it. We have been assured, and Scott, this is your opportunity, that this will complete the project. They are looking at completing the build out of the towers and the middle mile fiber. I think the issue into 2025 would be the connections to the homes and fiber to the premise. And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Correct. Supervisor Dickinson, you're absolutely justified to express concern, because we have been behind schedule, as well as the cost to go up. I want to just remind the committee that when we talk about the additional funding being asked for, that is including not just the county project, but also the Leather Camp project. So we have not asked, so the Leather Camp project is going to continue to move forward, but I'll start first with the county project. Yes, that had been delayed. I had talked before that part of that was our fault, that our contractor was not performing as we wanted them to, and therefore we terminated and replaced them. Also, the rock, as well as what John had said about inflationary pressures, now that everyone wants to do fiber, the cost for those materials has gone up significantly. But as John had said, what Bug Tussle is committed to is finishing the countywide project as well as the Leather Camp project this year for the funds that we're looking at from previous and that we're asking for the county to consider at this present time. The last part that I'll throw in there, which is how in many ways we're different than our competitors, is that all of the funding that we're asking for is an investment in our partnership. We're not asking for the county to write a check and that goes into the kitty for us to do the project. We're doing this from a loan standpoint, of which that means that the county will receive financial compensation for being a partner with us to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars, but also when it's all said and done, you have an increased public good in the respect that you have improved broadband access to Marathon County residents. And as Bug Tussle, this is where we've always been, which is trying to get broadband access to the rural areas. But overall, I understand your frustration, Supervisor Dickinson.
Any further questions, comments from committee members? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion to proceed.
We have a motion from Supervisor Gisselman to proceed. We have a second. We have a second from Supervisor Soibert. Any further questions, comments? Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
Just the only comment I'm going to make is I'll approve it to move it forward to the full county board because I think it's important that the entire county board have a say on it. So that really is the only reason I'm going to vote yes on it. Thanks.
Thank you. And I understand we have Supervisor Vole on WebEx at this time. Can you confirm that, Supervisor Vole?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
We have a approval of 5-0 motion. And I understand is that, do we need to take a separate motion for both these items? Okay.
It's one resolution for both.
Yeah. Okay. That was my understanding. Thank you. Moving on to item 5B, rumble strips as outlined in the Marathon County Roadway Safety Plan. I guess just to intro this, we heard a lot during public comment. I think it's important as we have this discussion, we think about all our users. We heard a lot from the bike community today, but we have a lot of other users on our road system as well, including walkers, runners, children, ATVs. So let's keep that in mind as part of our discussion. One thing I think is kind of an introduction from staff here, maybe a little bit of refresher on how we got the safety plan. Specifically, what are we discussing? What's the actual impacts? And what are staff recommendations? So I'll throw it over to Kevin and Jim.
Thank you. The safety plan was brought forward. Brown County completed a safety plan. Excuse me. Now many other counties are. We kind of. One thing being proactive after we got the safety plan done. WISDOT has decided it's a great idea for counties to have WIS safety plans. So now there is funding out there. So we missed the boat by being a little proactive with it. But we did approve the safety plan. It looked at all of our roads, different low cost and higher cost alternatives to make our entire roadway safe. So they took they took a look at improving edge line. They took a look at putting chevrons on curves, known areas of accidents, potential areas of accidents. So we brought this to the committee. It was introduced to the committee and it was approved in 2021, I believe. So maybe Kevin has some more details with it here in a second he can hit on. I appreciate the passion the Wausau Wheelers have for their activities too, but as highway engineers, we need to balance the best for all users. As Chair Favrick has said, we have the cyclists, we have the locals, which we've heard from the locals. I've heard from locals out there saying that, they do want some type of rumble strip out there for when they're out there with their family. So we have heard from the locals. We heard from the members that don't group ride. They're fine with our proposal as is, some of them that we heard from. So I just want to throw some quick numbers out there. On the 3 projects that we're looking at for this year, County Trunk Highway KK has an average daily traffic of 2,000 cars a day. So you take that times 365, we're looking at 730,000 vehicles a year on that road. If you want to start looking at how many miles are driven, if you take that road, it's 9 miles long. Some people drive the entire length. Some people might only drive a quarter of a mile. So a conservative number, I've just divided it by half. I took the 730,000 vehicles times the 4.5. That's 3.28 million miles driven on Highway KK. Again, on Highway J, the average daily traffic on Highway J is 2,800 cars a day times the 365. That gives you over 1 million vehicles a year on that road. In Highway X, the mileage on that one is 7.5. You do the same formula that I was using, take it by 2 conservative numbers, that's 3.8 million miles driven on Highway J. Highway X, average daily traffic is 2,300 cars a day. Times the 365, you're looking at 839,500 vehicles a year, with the mileage being over 1.5 million miles. So that's just some of the mileage. The 3 roads that we're particularly talking about this year are some of our higher use roads. So those are some of the reasons for the rumble strips. The National Cooperation of Highway Research Program did a study, and a couple other numbers I'll just throw out there. On the centerline rumble strips, they've seen significant reductions in fatal and injury crashes. On the 2-lane roads, it's a 38 to 50% reduction. And for the shoulder line or edge line rumble strips, for the runoffs, they've seen a 26 to 46% reduction. So those are pretty significant numbers with those rumble strips added. I know a lot of people have been talking about the AASHTO design line, but there also is a sentence in the AASHTO manual saying, in some cases to address particular safety issues, agencies may choose to install rumble strips on existing roads even when sufficient shoulder for bicycles cannot be provided. Such decisions should be made with full recognition of the impact of all roadway users. So I just want to throw that one out there. So those are my comments, and Kevin's got some more with how we see this going forward.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I'll try to cipher through my notes here after Randy and Jim kind of hit a few of my points on here. But first, I did want to acknowledge everybody that did have input on this. The Wausau Wheelers and their group they're presenting a real conflict with the installation. The benefits and the pros and the cons are what we kind of need to weigh out in here. So probably the biggest negative is the impact on the group riders. The biggest positive is going to be the safety for those solo riders and the motorists that are on there. So those 2 things are kind of in conflict in here, and that's what the ultimate decision will kind of weigh out, and have to try to figure out what a good balance is of that. Regarding the study, one of the things on there looks at crashes on our roads, but it's really, those safety studies are more of a systemic approach. What they look at is 2-lane rural roads with 55-mile-an-hour speed limits. So they don't necessarily drill down to going, this particular mile had a head-on crash here and run off the road crashes here, because the nature of those crashes don't typically depend on that particular location. It's the frequency. We had a crash on Highway H this past year where a driver dropped their lunch and was working with that, and they had a lane departure, resulted in a crash. That didn't necessarily have to happen on that 1 mile of road. It happened on a 2-lane rural 55-mile-an-hour road. So that's where this approach kind of looks at it, and that 36% reduction in those crashes is that systemic look of those 2-lane rural highways. So that's kind of how some of those numbers come about, versus looking at, when we have an intersection, we'll look at particular traffic movements because they're very specific to that intersection. This type of approach doesn't look at that. It looks at those general roadways. It weighs in pretty heavily to the traffic volumes, for the simple fact that the more volume you have, the more frequency you have of every crash, that type of crash that can occur. So these are roadways that are a little bit more heavily traveled county highways with over 2,000 cars a day on each of them. As far as construction details, we did have in the last packet the approach that we would look at on Highway X. That road, we have 15-foot asphalt lanes that we put out there. The recommended improvement would be putting a fog line at 11 feet, a small gap between the shoulder rumble strip, and then that would leave about 3 feet of paved shoulder outside of that, which is, I think you guys heard a lot of public comment, 4 feet is that recommended minimum length width out there for heavily biked routes. Highway KK does have a little bit wider pavement. We're at about 17 feet out there, so we would be able to have over 4.5 feet of paved shoulder outside of the rumble strip on that one. So it's two different little scenarios in there. For details of layout, we would be following the Wisconsin DOT standard detail. That detail was made with input from road users and kind of the entire state from a team down in Madison. So they have 48 feet in that 12-foot gap. The 12-foot gap is meant for some bike maneuvering for people to get out of the lane when they see debris or something, an obstruction in the road or a parked car. For solo bicyclists, it works real well. For group bicyclists, it presents that challenge that if you can't see very far ahead of you, you don't know what the hazard is until the very moment you need to make that maneuver. One other thing I wanted to acknowledge on here, Highway J, there is a fairly heavily traveled route that the Wausau Wheelers have on their website between Litzer Road and Martin Road. For that segment, knowing that that was used by multiple groups each week, we omitted the rumble strips in there, so we left that out. So just when put out there that we did try to get some balance and some consideration in for those routes that we saw were more heavily used by those groups. They have stated that there are other groups that use the entire section of Highway J, but that is the one that we saw seemed to be multiple times per week that there were groups running that, and that's their connection from the Weston YMCA to get over to Highway Q on some of their circular routes. I think that kind of hits on my highlights. The other thing we touched on a little bit is rumble strips versus mumble strips. Rumble strips are what you commonly see out on the side of the highways right now. You're used to seeing it's a slight divot into the pavement, and then the pavement's not touched, and the mill head kind of goes up completely out of the pavement, back down again to make those series of rumble strips out there. A mumble strip is starting to get implemented a little bit more. It is a little different scenario where the mill head goes down into the pavement, and rather than coming clear out to make that abrupt stop and go movement, it stays in the pavement and kind of rides in like a roller coaster motion. The results are that it's less abrupt if you're on a smaller tire. It has a little bit less noise externally to the vehicles, which is for residents, but it still does get the kind of shaking effect of the car to give the motorists that alert that they're leaving their lane. So that is something we've talked with our contractors that they said they'd be able to do that for essentially the same cost. So there's no cost difference in it, just a little bit different approach to do the same thing. One last thing I'll throw out there, when we looked at placement of these, put down that recommendation to do a shoulder rumble strip with our fog line at 11 feet, that gap, and then the 8-inch rumble strip. Another alternative is the edge line rumble strip, where the rumble strip itself overlaps with that white fog line so that they coincide each other. The benefits of that from the cycling side is we take up about 4 inches less space out there, 4 to 8 inches. We also put the vehicles closer to the area they're biking on for blowing debris off. The downside is if you keep that 11-foot fog line and you bring the rumble strips that much closer to where your through traffic is always traveling, the residents are going to get a lot more noise from it, just from those minor incidental hits. So that's why I'd put in that exhibit from last month's packet recommending that 11-foot, 4-inch gap and the 8-inch rumble strip as kind of a balance of keeping at least that 3 feet of pavement out there, giving the motorists enough room so that they're not getting as many incidental hits so that the residents aren't hearing excessive noise from them. So I think with that, if you guys have any questions, I'll be here. Otherwise, I'll let Jim wrap up.
One other thing we looked at doing as far as placement is we'll also skip any place there's a driveway that would give an additional area for the cyclist to maneuver. So if every time there's a driveway, if you look at Highway KK, for example, quite a few residents out there, every driveway would be skipped, so that would also give them some extra area out there. I'll just finish up with one last point is it was mentioned about paving the shoulders on Highway N. I travel Highway N quite often on my way home. I took it last night on the way home. I was following a pickup truck with dualies. It's a construction vehicle. And in the area between Rib Mountain and 107, where we do have about a 3-foot paved shoulder, The gentleman, I'm assuming, I could see his baseball cap, kept looking down. I'm assuming he was on his phone. If you're familiar with that road is very hilly. If those duels were both on the right side of the fog line, if I had to guess how many times in that segment he was right of that fog line, I would guess anywhere from 15 to 20 times he was on the right side of that fog line. Now, if a bicyclist, which I see quite a few bicyclists, singlest bicycles out there, I've never seen a group ride, and I think the group riders are usually a little later than I go home. If there had been a single bicyclist out there, I would hate to see what could have happened. Not saying something would have, but this where the truck was driving last night was a fine example of those edge line rumble strips would have kept that pickup truck into his lane. The committee has a lot of decisions to make. Staff recommendations is to follow the safety document that we receive, but ultimately it is a committee decision.
Thank you. Open it up to committee discussion. What's everybody's thoughts? Supervisor Soibert.
And the way it sounds to me, the highway department has got it under control. They're thinking about it. They're trying to make changes, and the question is, how many accidents will those highways have without rumble strips? I know Highway M, south of Roselleville, an intersection where there was a couple of deaths every year, completely eliminated to keep the people on the road in the lane and to get them to stop when they're supposed to. So that's where I'm at.
Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did talk about this and this issue. I've been in this committee since 2020. We've talked about it. And one of the reasons we did talk about it was we talked about ATV and UTV, and we went through a significant period of time trying to delve into all of the safety issues and access issues, and trying to address the needs of every person in the county, in the community. I see this similarly. ATV, UTV is more obviously rural. With this issue, if you see everybody who came and spoke, this is really more of an urban issue for the amount of biking, especially when you're talking about the group, the groups who are going out biking as opposed to like a single person. I do bike ride, not as much as I would like, but I just was out bike riding last night, and I was on State Highway 97 in Stratford, and that shoulder has to be 10 feet wide, and it's a 35 mile per hour. I don't feel comfortable riding my bike on that. I just don't. Why? Because somebody could be bopping their head, looking at their phone, might have had a drink. So that's one of the reasons I don't bike, and I certainly don't bike rurally. I appreciate that you guys do, and I certainly want to address the concerns that you have because your safety matters. But there are some numbers to consider. Since 2001 in Marathon County, there's been 313 bicycle accidents and 6 fatalities. And the overwhelming majority of that is within the Wausau area. Only 19 of those were outside of the Wausau area. So again, it's that urban issue. But vehicle crashes, 47,000 in that same time frame, and 378 fatalities for a variety of reasons. So again, it matters. But our roads are primarily for vehicles of speed. Not necessarily groups of people riding bicycles. So one of the things that comes to my mind is, I don't know the paths that the bike groups travel. I don't know if you have designated, hey, this is the way we're gonna run, in the Wausau area. I also don't know if there's any designated kind of rural route that you go. And if that's something that we wanted to consider at some point, I would look into that. It wouldn't, we could look at the safety plan or something if there's some bike route, but I've never seen a bike competition in Marathon County going through the entire county or anything either. So ultimately where I'm at is, I think we are looking at the issue. I think we're trying to make it safe for everybody. I think our primary concern is our major vehicles on the roads. and about that safety. And I do think the rumble strips help. And if there's some sort of greater, routes that we want to look at in a plan to designate something more for bicycles, I would be open to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gisselman, or I can go, you can go, whatever you're. All right. Thank you. You look like you were grabbing for the mic, so I think and echo some of the earlier comments and appreciate the communications that we've had with a lot of the biking community on this. It definitely is a difficult decision, and looking at it from multiple ways, I see all their points. I see the points that are being brought forward by our staff. It really is a balancing act. We do have great biking in Marathon County and like to find a way to keep it that way. Looking at some of the different options, and one of the things that kind of caught my attention in the conversations with the bike community, as well as some of the residents. We had a gentleman speak from County X today talking about noise. I live pretty close to I-39. From my window at night, especially in the summertime when it's open, you can definitely hear that noise as people are leaving their lanes. There's no doubt about it. It is loud. I did have the opportunity earlier this week to get on my bike over on Highway 153 and experience the rumble strips through the center line. I have different biking gear than some of the other folks in the room and the people that do it more often. I think my bike's 20 years old, but I was able to do that, ride down the middle of the centerline rumble strips. It's definitely an experience. Crossing them was doable, but I understand what is being brought up. Some of the things that caught my attention, especially last month, Kevin mentioned the mumble strips. I did some research on that, and I look at that as possible an alternative that we can do that's going to address some of the concerns specifically about noise and also about ability for the bikers to cross that. It seems to be a good mix. It might be a good compromise on that side. Another thing was conversation about where the strips are placed, whether it's the shoulder rumble strip, where we're leaving that 4-inch gap and then placing that 8-inch rumble, or the other option of being an edgeline rumble strip, which is placed closer to the vehicle lane, which would provide bikers more room. I think that, in my opinion, the edgeline rumble strip might be a good compromise in that we're moving the rumble strip closer to the center line, giving the bike community and all those other users more room. Just some of my thoughts. Any other comments? Supervisor Gisselman.
So then what is the resolve today? I see some movement here, but is whatever motion would be the recommendations coming from the Highway Department, I would trust, right? So what happens to the other suggestions, other movements that this county can make with regard to safety for bicycles, group travel, single? I think there is a need to maybe continue to look at this and study this with not only the single, but with also the group travel. As the motion I'm sure is proceeding today, I would vote against it. I think that the citizens that brought their concerns this morning certainly weigh heavily on me, so I have some serious questions about how we're proceeding, but I would think that the question of how we proceed lands with this committee, and I think that is where this committee should maybe take another jump and move into a larger scene of bicycle safety in this county. When you speak about the Wausau area, does that go out to 107, or what exactly is the Wausau area? I think the metro area is fairly large, but I think it's mostly metro as well as rural, and I think we need to look, and I would look to this committee to develop ideas with regard to even to the 25 budget. And I think that we need to seriously look at this, and I would hope this committee would take that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Voll, do you have any comments?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I had a couple questions for Kevin as well. So Kevin, is there a reason that the rumble strip has to be 8 inches wide and can't be 4 inches wide outside of the fog line?
The 8 inches is following just the Wisconsin standard details. The contractor has the ability to go down to 6, but then we're getting outside of following what everybody else in the state is doing. So it's kind of one of those things, it's a safety enhancement, so it's not a required enhancement. So I don't know if there's a little bit of leeway there. I'd probably want to touch base with a few other people just to make sure we're not venturing outside of what the norms are of the industry, but the Wisconsin standard construction details shows that 8 inches, and that's why that was used in there.
Then is there a reason why you can't move the rumble strip closer to the outside edge of the fog line and not leave that gap between the two?
No, it would just get into being similar to what the edge line stripe is, which I think Wisconsin just changed their details on including that edge line recently. So if some of the older construction plans did not have that, but I think it was just this year they added the shoulder rumble strip, which has the gap, and then the edge line, which overlaps with the pavement marking. Okay. One of the little challenges with the edge line is timing of putting that in with painting the road. Sometimes it requires you basically to paint that edge line twice. You put once in so that you have that guide and a template there, and you mill it up, and then you're
They come and chop it all out. You got to repaint it. Yeah.
So you may have to paint it a second time.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks for the questions, for the answers. And just a general comment, Chair. As Gary had mentioned, I think it's important to take into account what everybody is commenting about, the bicyclists and tourism and all those kinds of things. And, as we try to move forward as a county, trying to be more acceptable of the roadways and who's going to be able to use them, whether it's bicyclists or UTVs, ATVs, or motorists. It's becoming we're coming to that, I guess, that situation or an era where it's more than just motorists are using the roads more frequently than they used to. So I think it's great that we're trying to figure out ways to resolve some of these problems. I think we just need to keep looking and trying to come up with some solutions that benefit everybody. Thanks, Randy.
All right. Yeah, I think, we've talked about, and it was mentioned in some of the public comments about creating something at the county level in terms of a bike group. I know through the MPO, there was a bike advisory group. I would say that what really needs to be expanded to an all-user group, because now that we've allowed ATVs, UTVs, there's a lot of different users on our roadways, and what may affect bikes, walkers, runners, is also going to affect our ATV, UTV users. So, further questions, comments? I can't see Jim, but go ahead, Jim.
I don't know which way the committee's leaning, but to clarify, when a motion is made, if it's for both the edge line and center line, if a motion is made or whatever, this way has some clarification if we're talking both or just the edge line at this point. Staff recommendation would be doing both, edge line and center line.
Looking at the safety plan, I think the center line is pretty well established, and that's kind of, it seems to be one of the most effective ways to reduce head-on crashes, right? I think that's, in my mind, the biggest conversation we're having today is about the edge line. I think the center line is well established for what it's effectively been able to do. I know there was some comment about it forcing vehicles further to the right to avoid it, but I think at the end of the day, that's been a pretty proven tactic for eliminating, and I shouldn't say eliminating, reducing a lot of those issues. Further questions, comments? Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
So does some sort of decision have to be made today because it's affecting construction that has to happen this summer on those 3 particular roads? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. For schedule-wise, our guys are working on X right now, so we plan to finish that. That's in the Jim's report that they plan to finish that paving this month. KK is scheduled for August, and Highway J is also scheduled for August.
Anybody further? I'd entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to follow the Highway Department's recommendations for the year, for the construction season, and then readdress it after the construction season this winter when we can get more in depth of what we're doing.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second from Dickinson. Open up discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
So the caveat being in that, and this is kind of my mindset, is there is some information here, for example, mumble strips that the highway department can take and work within the plan to address some concerns as were brought up. That's the way I see the motion. Is that correct?
I think we should specifically clarify what, when I hear rumble strips, I think it's in the literature that we've looked at in the past. I think that's very clear. I think that there is always some opportunity to let our expert staff address very site-specific things when it comes down to it. But further comments? If not, I would make an amendment to the motion, offer an amendment to the motion that would include, that would exchange rumble strips for mumble strips, and also change it from, excuse me while iPad times out, from instead of doing the shoulder rumble strip, do the edgeline rumble strip, and moving the mumble strip closer to the vehicles and giving more room on the shoulder. If anybody would second that.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second from Vol. Further comments, discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Dickinson.
So is your amendment saying in all situations that it would be mumble strips, and in all situations it would be the edge line closer to, as you call it, the fog line, or is the edge line the fog line, or is it the same thing? So in all situations, or is the highway department have the, have the latitude within that to make the decisions, like you said, on site?
Yeah,
I guess when I'm looking, I want to make sure that they're clear exactly what we're giving them, and it doesn't become an issue, at the end of the summer, saying, well, you didn't do what they said, because that puts them in a terrible position.
Yeah, I think that we have to have some discretion for our staff, but, for these three projects, I think specifically, if we need to come back, I think that it would be a good trial just to see what it looks like. We don't know that there's any of these established in Marathon County at this point yet. I think it would be a good trial to see how they work. We can evaluate what the 25 work plan looks like, but instead of in the safety plan where we're talking about rumble strips, it would be modified by the mumble strips, and then utilizing the edge line rumble instead of the shoulder rumble strips to give the bike community more room. Go ahead, Supervisor
As a
Dickinson.
follow-up, I guess my question to the highway department is that do you feel that still meets, is there enough evidence of those two items to justify safety within the safety plan as you would see it? I mean, are you comfortable saying that's safe? That's safe?
Yes, I do.
Supervisor Gisselman.
So I would like to hear from the, if it's permissible, and with the okay of this committee, to hear from the bicycle community. I know that we have a planner, or a variety of people really acknowledgeable with regard to transportation planning and all. I would be willing, if it's okay with this committee, to hear from anyone that would want to weigh in on this amendment. Thank you.
Sure. Let me give one opportunity for Supervisor Hardinger, who's joined us in the back. Do you have any questions, comments where we're at? Okay. I will allow, if we have one representative from the bike community in the crowd that would like to just address some of the comments and discussion that you've heard here today. paper, rock, scissors for it, maybe? Why don't you come up to the mic up here, Andrew?
Okay, thank you.
Just introduction, your name.
Yep, Andrew Lynch, 1014 Graves Avenue, Wausau, and
Is that mic on, or you might need to get closer?
yeah, it's on. Sorry. I'll just crush that. It's fine. And I'm a city planner for the city of Wausau, staff of the Bike Ped Committee. I was also formerly Marathon County Wausau MPO transportation planner. So I do actually remember these conversations in the past. Also the ATV, UTV discussion. So you're right, there's a lot of history with this. Specifically asked about the mumble strips and the edge line. In the literature that we've looked at the Wausau Bike Ped Committee, that is one of the recommendations to have if you're going to have some kind of installation on the shoulder or near the shoulder, that reducing that impact that you would get with the mumble strips and moving them closer to the fog line are some of the recommended treatments to accommodate cyclists. So I would think at this point, to be able to proceed for the construction of this year, that would be a compromise for the cyclists. I think it'd be nice to also look ahead and at future years as well. I'm sure you guys don't want to do this every year, so and I think it would give staff a better option to be able to work a few years out as well. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. Supervisor Soibert.
Are the lane widths going to be the same from going forward if we go to fog line? Are our lane widths going to be identical, or if we narrow those down, are we going to alter that fog line, or what's the answer to that?
Trying to think of just like work through some of the projects in my head. The two that we have this year on X and J, we have 15 feet available out there. KK, we're at 17 feet out there. I think what would make sense if we're going to go with that edge line rumble strip is KK, we could go a little bit wider and still probably have about 4.5 feet of pavement outside of the fog line. X and J are a little bit narrower. I'm thinking somewhere in the middle of that, we could probably get a little bit more than 3 feet, which we would have had with the old scenario. My concern is if you keep that fog line too close and then put the rumble strip in, that will get that inadvertent noise for the residents there. If we would put that edge line, the edge of the rumble strip, we'd probably be able to get about 3 feet, 3 inches to a little bit more than that. It's kind of, you're splitting hairs out there. It's machinery moving down the road at 2 miles an hour, milling out pavement and putting paint down. So it's never an exact science. But I think if we would go with a little bit wider than 11-foot lane with the edge line rumble strip, it'll be a good compromise to try to minimize the vehicular inadvertent noises that they hit just because it's so narrow, and achieving at least 3 feet or more for that paved shoulder. But it's really going to depend on the road bed, and that's really what the scenario we run into is some of our road beds are wider than others, so we run into issues with being able to just easily put more width on it, and sometimes that outside edge of the road bed isn't the most stable structure too. So just if you get questions of why there's 2 feet of gravel out there, couldn't we have paved that? We've had some roads where we pave like that, and that outside edge, it doesn't have good support and ends up failing, and that asphalt still costs the same amount of money to put out there, and it doesn't give you a quality surface that the bicyclists would be looking for anyway. That's why we do try to leave a 2-foot gravel shoulder. It's for structure for the road bed out there. I don't know if I answered your question though.
You did, and I'm back to my amendment again. I mean, the highway department's recommendations, and if they're on the same page we are, to use mumble or to use rumble according to what'll work and what'll fit, is the route we should be going. Thank you.
Just to tie on that, Tom, with that, moving it closer, it would still make the road lane wider than it is today. It wouldn't be as wide as it could be without it, but it'd be wider than it is today.
What I'm getting at is every road we're going to build, you're not going to go a standard 17 foot, or you're not going to go a standard 14 foot. Some might be 12 foot. So again, it comes to the highway department's recommendation, the best build to make the safest road for everyone.
And just a reminder also is, if you look through the safety plan, the majority of the roads aren't going to get anything. So it's only the ones that show up in the safety plan. Not every road's going to get an edge line or a center line rumble strip. There may be some of the rural areas, Highway P west of 97, like we did a few years ago. The safety plan just said put them into curves. So it's not every road that we're paving. So that's something to take account.
Further discussion? Otherwise, we can vote on the amendment. The amendment would be to insert mumble instead of rumble within the main motion, and edge line instead of shoulder rumble, edge line rumble strips instead of the shoulder rumble strips. I'm tying myself in knots here by saying rumble and mumble and everything, but mumble instead of rumble in terms of what's actually being done to the pavement, and then using the edge line is where we'd place the mumble strip instead of the shoulder. Is everybody clear on what the amendment? Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
I just want to, is that only applying to the construction on these 3 roads, or is this changing our plan?
To clarify, it's for the 2024 construction. I'd like to have a more depth in discussion for 25. And like we talked about, hopefully having some clarifying policy that we're not having this discussion on an annual basis. Is everybody clear? We'll vote on the motion. All those in favor? Excuse me, thank you. This is the amendment to the motion, so we'll be taking a vote on the amendment, and that will determine what the vote on the motion would be. Excuse me, the main motion. So this is simply on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, amendment passes. We'll move on to the main motion as amended. Any further conversation? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we have a 6-0 vote to move to implement that. Thank you for everybody in their attendance. Appreciate the conversation. I think we heard a lot of things and learned a lot, so thank you. Given that it is 10:43 on my clock, I'd ask that our educational presentations that we're receiving be condensed and summarized as much as possible. So we'll move on to item 7, CCIT update projects. Mr. Klein.
There's an update in your packet, I believe, right? Made in there, David? I don't have anything particular. In the essence of time, since this has already been a long meeting, I think I could pass. I could just mention one thing, and that's that I think I mentioned this last month, right at the beginning of the last meeting. We had significant problems getting the budget, the 2024 budget moved into Workday, and that was resolved a couple of weeks ago. And now we're working on doing some training on how to use some of the reporting in it.
Any questions on the CCIT update? Hearing none, we thank you for your report. Moving on to item B, broadband update, BEAD broadband update grant. Go ahead, Erin.
Hi, I'll make it quick as well. I included the brochure that we've been using to explain the BEAD process. We just completed the challenge process, and starting next week, the rebuttal process will begin. I submitted challenges on a couple smaller areas that just to clarify things to make sure they were BEAD eligible. And now we will be moving forward to identifying priority areas for BEAD funding. The numbers we have on that brochure are going to be impacted by two pieces of information that John is going to share with you now.
I mentioned earlier that we have been working with Frontier as part of the 2022 PSE grant application, and as of late yesterday, Frontier respectfully requests the ability to voluntarily withdraw the grant request. We had pledged $944,000+ toward that through ARPA funds that will now be available for other projects, but more importantly, we're in that challenge process. Hopefully those sites will be eligible for BEAD funding going forward. And the second item is Charter has requested the FCC and for the ability to abandon their RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, obligations in certain census tracts. We don't understand the complications or the ramifications of that, but that may make additional areas open for BEAD. The FCC has been struggling this on a nationwide basis. We're not sure how that will impact us, but it will result in potentially areas being unserved, and we'll need to figure out how to address those in the BEAD process.
Thank you. So but prior to this information coming through, we knew we had about 6,800 addresses that were or underserved in Marathon County. Knowing that Frontier is revoking that grant, that will increase by 1,600. We do not know the number of houses or addresses that will be impacted by the removal of the RDOF funding.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, we thank you for your report. We are on to item C, 2024 highway construction season update.
You have it first time, in essence. We'll skip that. You have it in your packet. We did get an update on the Inquick Bridge, the bridge that was going to go in a really fast system. They're having trouble getting steel. We were going to start that project next week. It looks like it's going to be probably the week after the 4th of July before we can go. So when we start, the time frame will still be same. It's just got reduced.
Okay. Appreciate the report. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to item 8 on our agenda, next meeting date, time announcements, future agenda items. 8A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussions. Lance did ask me to note that we'll have quarterly financials in our next update. Anything further?
Excuse me, Chair. Well, also, I should have, we'll probably be going into closed session to discuss future land purchase of our new building. And I also have scheduled the representative from the DOT to talk about a safety plan. So it will be a full agenda. And to note, it is 1 week late.
Correct. We'll be meeting on July 11th as everybody can find something better to do than sit through an infrastructure meeting for 2 hours on July 4th. At least I hope you can. Anything else from the committee members? Hearing none, we're up for item number 9. We have a motion for adjournment from Supervisor Dickinson, second by Soibert. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you.
How about opposed?
And nobody's ever opposed. They shouldn't be. John would oppose it. He loves local government so much.